The ancient Near East of the Bronze Age was an unforgiving environment. You survived by what you could physically see, hold, and defend. In this harsh setting, the prophet Elisha faces two simultaneous crises. The first is almost painfully ordinary. A young student loses a borrowed iron axe head in the muddy waters of the Jordan River. The second crisis is existential. This image of the ancient royal city of Samaria reveals exactly how isolated the Israelites were when a massive Aramean army surrounded their walls. Elisha's servant wakes up, looks over the wall, and sees thousands of enemy troops. He processes this threat entirely through his physical senses, and his immediate reaction is absolute paralyzing panic. When we face a crisis, our default instinct is to let the visible physical scale of the threat entirely dictate the scale of our fear. There is a theological framework we easily fall into. Let's call it mechanical logic. It's the assumption that obedience instantly yields blessing, and suffering is always a direct punishment for a specific sin. But the reality in Samaria contradicts that logic. Elisha and his students hadn't committed a crime to bring an army to their door, nor had they sinned to drop the tool in the river. Yet the physical evidence is bleak. As you can see in this heavily corroded iron axe head from the era, losing this expensive, dense metal at the bottom of a river was a severe material loss. At the same time, the city walls remain heavily surrounded by hostile troops. Living righteously did not generate a magical force field against a military siege. When physical circumstances refuse to align with our theological assumptions, our literal eyes fail to give us the actual truth of the situation. The Aramean army is poised to strike. Elisha does not pray for a storm to scatter them, and he doesn't ask for a sudden plague to wipe them out. Instead, he offers a highly specific, counterintuitive prayer. He asks God for exactly one thing: open his eyes that he may see. In an instant, the servant looks past the enemy troops and sees the rugged mountains filled with a glowing, fiery light, chariots of fire, and massive heavenly armies descending on the ridges. This newly revealed spiritual reality dwarfs the Arameans. The unseen guard is vastly larger and infinitely more capable than the physical threat outside the gates. True spiritual sight recognizes that divine protection is already present. Once you see it, the physical danger is instantly rendered secondary. Then the divine reversal hits. God strikes the invading Aramean army with sudden physical blindness, neutralizing their entire offensive capability on the spot. Elisha immediately exploits this. He leads the vulnerable, disoriented troops away from their camp and marches them directly into the center of the Israelite capital. The king of Israel sees thousands of helpless enemy soldiers in his courtyard. His immediate political instinct is violent vengeance. He wants to slaughter them. But Elisha issues a shocking command: throw them a feast. The principle of grace at work here is precise. Vengeance belongs exclusively to God. Responding to an existential threat with unconditional, unmerited kindness breaks the human cycle of conflict. The Arameans eat their fill and march back home without a single casualty. The military threat is entirely neutralized through peace. Divine power is rarely about the violent annihilation of an enemy. It is frequently exercised through radical grace, offering the adversary a clear opportunity to recognize the God of Israel. The Arameans retreated. The lost iron axe head was retrieved from the water. But we have to be careful not to draw a universal rule from these two events. Miracles are not formulas. They are specific historical revelations designed to build faith in an exact moment. They are not a guarantee of material restoration for every believer. Genuine faith does not mean you will never lose your property, and it does not promise that every hardship or hostile force will vanish the second you pray. As this diagram illustrates, God operates through varied, unpredictable methods during a crisis. He doesn't follow a simple transactional formula. He might offer complete protection, he might temporarily restrain the threat, or he might deploy grace to reform the adversary. The primary objective is not always the immediate removal of the environmental threat. The goal is teaching humanity to trust his sovereignty over all possible outcomes. True faith is not a psychological trick to imagine a safety net that isn't there. It is never the denial of harsh physical reality. Faith is an active prayer for a cognitive shift. It is a plea for God to adjust the exact angle from which we perceive the world. Ongoing hardships are not proof of God's absence. They serve as a catalyst, pushing us to abandon our reliance on raw physical data and fleshly reactions. The God who governs the geopolitical destiny of warring nations is the exact same God who cares deeply about a young student dropping a borrowed tool into a river. The macro and the micro are held in the same hand. When our spiritual eyes are open to this reality, the paralysis of fear lifts. We are empowered to face our daily anxieties and our worst enemies with the fearless grace of the Father.